Hi, this is Randy Randall of No Age and host of the podcast Hyphen It with Randy Randall. I want to welcome our newest sponsor to the show, DistroKid. DistroKid helps musicians get their music on all the major streaming platforms, and artists keep 100% of their royalties. Hyphen It listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate. Again, that's distrokid.com/VIP/HYPHENATE. Go get your music streaming everywhere now. Yo, what's happening? Thank you so much for joining me here on Hyphen It with Randy Randall. That is me. Today, my guest is the incredible guitarist and world-class chef, Cheetie Kumar. Cheetie was in bands like the Cherry Valance and Birds of Avalon. Super awesome, retro, garage rocking, awesome bands. And she held down the guitar duties in both those bands, as well as having an illustrious early band management career as well, before going into restaurant touring and chefing. Is that the correct verb? To chef? To cook? I think and on this episode, you'll hear Cheetie explain the difference between what a cook and a chef is. The world of restaurants is definitely new to me. I mean, I've eaten at a lot of restaurants, but I've never really worked at a restaurant or been behind the scenes at one. And Cheetie just has such a great, cool way of explaining her process of how she got from guitars to kitchens. And really, really just interesting, cool person that has a great story. And I think, talks about, the immigrant experience growing up of a child of immigrants and sort of the expectations and pressures put on somebody in that position, and how she finally was able to sort of combine all of her talents and passions in the kitchen and sort of bridge the gap between leading these double lives that so many of us hyphenates live, even starting off as childhood, from being in a background where there's things that are expected or required of you. Or that was something she had said, that her parents, required certain actions like going to school, getting good grades. There was, behaviors like going to concerts were not permitted growing up, but that was so much of her story. So I won't spoil anything. I will let her explain it all, but I was really just blown away and just really happy understanding her hyphenate journey. So join me now. Hi, Cheetie. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I am obsessed with your particular blend of guitar and cooking. This is all the research I've done. It sounds so intriguing. Can you tell me a little bit about? Maybe we'll start with the guitar first, where that came from, and then we'll get into the food after. So what was your adventure to guitar?
Well, it was, most things I've done have been sort of a convoluted path. I've just always been obsessed with music, and just the style of music I liked was always very guitar forward. And I, spent the first 8 years of my life in India, and then we moved to the Bronx. And, I was 8. Being an immigrant kid is never easy, but, my respite was food and music, and radio stations were playing some cool stuff. And there was a lot of great things happening in New York City at that time. And I didn't really realize, that was special, but it's just like, wow, this, I just liked a lot of music. And I asked for a guitar for my 12th birthday and didn't get it, but my sister had an acoustic. And so I learned a few things, down by the valley. Like my mom was like, go take this guitar lesson at this community center. And I was like, it was the worst, folk music, like not my thing at all. I learned the intro to Stairway to Heaven, and I was like, I think what I need is an electric guitar. And they were like, absolutely not. So I just kind of abandoned that and just kind of stayed in music through like the management side, and that's what I did in college at UMass. I worked at the radio station, and I just kind of never really thought that I had the ability. Well, I really loved music, and I wanted to perform, but it was just kind of a fantasy, And then moved to Raleigh and I was kind of pursuing a career in music management, and I met my now husband Paul, and we I don't know, just kind of like that era in the 90s where like chops weren't as important, and it was more about the guts and the expression. And so he was like, let's just play. And so we started playing, and I was playing bass. I did that for about a year and a half, and then just started playing guitar because I played bass like a lead guitar player. So
That's amazing.
yeah, and just kind of did it.
I'll jump in. I want to go back. There's so much we blew through. So I'm so curious what was the music that you were hearing that you were attracted to? You said it was not the folk music. Was it more Led Zeppelin? What was sort of some of those early music memories that really kind of spoke to you?
Like, the Ramones and Talking Heads and Devo, but then also like Def Leppard and Van Halen and Led Zeppelin and, The Who. I mean, I just was kind of all over the place. I loved The Cure. I loved Depeche Mode. There was just so much happening. And, I was like into Duran Duran too,
Yeah.
Very confused, but like now I still, all those bands still really hold up. So I think I had pretty good taste for a kid.
Yeah. And was this just on the radio, driving around with the radio going, or were we going to record shops, or were we going to see live music? What was that experience
no
like?
live music allowed.
Yeah.
Okay. My parents are Indian and I'm a girl, so that wasn't really very permitted for me. But my sister was, is 7 years older. And so she had sort of a conduit. She had a friend named Joss who was like Filipino, and she was really punky and really cool. And she always had like good records. So she would always turn my sister on to good stuff. And then we would go to flea markets, and there were, like I remember my sister bought the first Cars record there. Like it was very vivid memory. And, then I became Cars obsessed for a minute. But the Pretenders were a huge, huge thing. Blondie and, and then Tina Weymouth in particular was just like so cool. And I don't know, it was just like very alluring to think of, I don't know, this idea of a woman in a band who's not, the sexy front person. Like I love Debbie Harry, but she was still kind of weird. I just really liked the idea of playing guitar and not being a front person.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, you said you're in the Bronx, you're in New York, and this is in the early '80s. I'm imagining. Yeah. I mean, what a hotbed of just music and and hip hop and everything kind of just exploding around you at the same time too.
Yeah, I went to public high school in the Bronx, and it was like,
oh my god, boogie down.
Yeah, 100%.
You had it all kind of happening all around you.
Right, I didn't even know it. I just thought it was just normal.
Right. How amazing. Were there any other musicians or artists or kind of hip hop artists that came out of your scene or out of your school or your time, your generation there that you were aware of? Or
not that I knew of. I was also kind of like a nerd. So like I was required to get good grades, and so I did. I don't know. I was very not to be like too dramatic, but I was pretty isolated because, when we moved, I was in the 4th grade. And so it took like a solid 4 or 5 years for me to become, I don't know, not even, I don't know if I've ever been comfortable in my skin here, but I didn't really have like cool friends, all my friends were also other immigrants. And that was the fortunate thing about, living in New York is that like, if we were in Kansas, like I wouldn't have had, that kind of exposure. But I think the thing that I bonded with my friends with was like, some of them were like, born here, but they were, children of immigrant parents. And then some of them were like really 2 years into the country. So we had this sort of like, misfit, good grades, but still kind of like not comfortable with being smart. And, it's kind of cliche now, but
No, but I mean, it strikes me as such an interesting, sort of bedrock to build this sort of hyphenated life on, that you were almost required to live a double life, the one that your parents required, as you said. It's such an interesting choice of words, that you were required to perform certain grades and cultural sort of signifiers, but at the same time have any kind of personal valuation or personal depth, and find satisfaction on the life that you wanted to live. This double life seemed to be baked in, and which I think is an interesting observation I hadn't thought of as a child of immigrants in America.
Speaking of the cars, right?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah,
So
I mean,
good.
I remember even thinking and being worried, like, is it okay that I literally have like two accents, my school accent and my home accent. Like I was really good at cultivating secrets, and I worried about it. I thought, maybe I'm a bad kid, maybe I'm a liar, but it's just like survival, and there's nothing that can stop somebody from being who they are, whether it's in secret or not. It's like you have the passions that you have, and I think sometimes we come in the world with it, and it's a disservice to our own self to ignore that, if you're even able to.
Right. But even we'll get into food in a little bit, where I want to kind of pace us out.
Sure.
But it just strikes me too as the idea of one or the other, that it's a binary kind of code switching, and then to the point of then integrating through maturity, or as life goes on, integrating those cultural sort of identities into your personal identity, and finding ways like that, whether it's through food or through other expressions. It sounds fascinating, and obviously the name of the show is Hyphenate, and I really find myself drawn to these ideas of because I think I was very similar. I didn't have just one passion. I loved skateboarding and movies and guitar and all these these things that I think most people have this. I feel like it's a funny thing to call someone a hyphenate, because I think most people are. I think this is just sort of a natural thing everybody does.
And it's so odd to me that like nobody gives you permission, or they didn't in my generation, to be that way when you're a kid. It's like everybody asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's just like, how do you ask a 9-year-old or even a 15-year-old or a 19-year-old? Like, you don't make this one decision for the rest of your life. And I think that this is the thing that I think probably causes anxiety to young kids and young adults, to this day. Like, most people have 3 careers in their life. And that's sort of like, when somebody told me that 10 years ago, I was like, oh, no shit. Wow. Amazing. That's the normal way to be, because otherwise you're just a flat, static human with like one direction. I mean, that's so boring,
Well, I mean, we contain many layers.
That's right.
And things that then value, and things that we can bring value to different situations that we're in. I think that's so much of it too, is sort of, what do you bring to the place that you're at, in terms of, value, participation, community, all of those sort of signifiers that we have to show that I have value here. I belong here.
That's right.
Whatever that is. So I think, you were saying, I want to continue on that line, but I also want to geek out and nerd out for a little bit, just from one guitarist to another. What was the guitar that you wanted that you didn't get, and then what was the guitar that you did finally get? That's from a gear perspective.
Well, being a Chrissy Hind sort of person, I just wanted a Telly. And so my first like real guitar, I had a pink Ibanez, which I don't think really counts, a single pickup with a push button, volume knob for gain. Wow. It was fun to play, but kind of a joke, and kind of like I was ashamed of it because I didn't want to be a girl guitar player, so I never played that out. But I managed a band that was they got like a big major label record deal, and like whatever. Their guitar player gave me and Paul and I were already together, a guitar to share, but I took it. It's a Telly Deluxe, a 1972 Telly Deluxe, and that guitar we still have. We still fight over it. Now it's his era, I guess. But that's the guitar I played on tour, like my first 3 or 4 tours, and then I started buying. I got an SG, I got a Les Paul. I got like a Dan Electro copy, Electra. I currently have a Guild SA something. It's an odd. I really love this guitar. Yeah, I love guitars.
How fun, right? I
Yeah.
think there is something about guitarists yeah, you ask any guitarist and it's rare you ever find one guitar or a guitarist with one guitar.
Yeah,
There's
that's
something about
right.
guitars that are kind of, it's a tool belt or it's a collectory kind of thing. And
That's
they all have different mojo. There's different songs in each guitar
That's right. And they have different, they make you play differently. And if you're writing songs, you think of things differently. Different expressions come out of your hands. It's like, no carpenters just got like, I only use Phillips heads. Like, well, you're kind of
right.
screwing yourself up there, buddy.
Yep. Each pickup, each wood, each neck, each kind of thing does what it
That's
does. You know
right.
what I mean? It's not, you can't use one for everything. It's incredible. So then going to UMass and psychology, that was the next step.
Hmm.
And then I imagine was that where you began to see live music, or what was the live music portion of this too? Because that's such a big part of music. There's the internal life of music that we hear in our heads alone, but then experiencing the community of music, I have to imagine, was a big part of your story.
Huge.
What was that like for you?
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
huge thing. I mean, um, when I was a kid, like I didn't, I think I tagged along with my sister to like a show at Central Park, and that was it. And then
Who was that?
it
Do you
was the
remember?
Ramones and the
What?
Pretenders opened, but we missed them. Subway.
That
I
is
know, I
insane.
know, but it
So
was like,
Pretenders opening for the Ramones in the park.
yeah, yeah.
What year was this? Do you remember? When would
I
this have been?
was,
What
I was,
lineup?
that was when we first came to America. So it was like 1980 or
So,
something like that.
wow, incredible.
Yeah, it was.
Thank God for older sisters.
I know, right? Well, she wasn't thrilled that I was with her, but it's all right. Um, but at UMass, I was ended up working with a concert board. So not only did I like go to shows, like I, helped put them on. I was involved in, everything from meeting the band, hospitality, like helping the stage manager, doing all the promotion. Like I really got into it. And the whole, I mean, I think, I think I've always just loved having a party, and the whole setup, like inviting a band, having them say yes, figuring out what time they get there, what kind of food they like, and like imagining how tired or thirsty or hungry they might be and what they might like, and like, making sure that the sound was good and like they had, good accommodations. Like there's just so many, it's kind of like a restaurant. There's so many aspects that go into something that feels very simple and normal, like, oh, I'm going to a show. Nobody thinks about, the fact that the band like drove 6 hours and, maybe left something behind at the last gig last night, It's just, I just think I became obsessed with that whole aspect of it. And, the idea of them kind of like living in a van was just so fascinating to me.
Well, and I imagine you got to live that life to a degree that.
And then some, yeah. More than made up for it. Curiosity satisfied.
Incredible. And what were some of those bands that you were bringing to the campus, or some of the bands you were interested in at that point?
I mean, there were a lot. Gosh, we hosted some crazy stuff. Everybody from like. I worked at this club too. I mean, I remember like the Fela Kuti being one of them, and then
Wow.
like
Incredible.
Robin Hitchcock and the Chameleons and the Connells from Raleigh, and Dinosaur Jr. was, Jay Mascis had lived in Amherst, so that was an easy one. Buffalo Tom. Man, it's just a lot. There was a band called Dump Truck, I think. I don't know. Just tons of stuff. We did a jazz series that was like affiliated with the school, so it was like Steve Terrell. Man, there were a lot. It was a lot of music.
It's eclectic.
Really eclectic, and like I wasn't a part of the big concert series like we did. We always did a big outdoor show, and like Queen Latifah was a headliner. I mean, it was massive. Real stuff. That concert board. I don't know if they're still as legit as it was when in my era, but it was for real. Yeah, like all those people could run, giant venues if they wanted to.
That's amazing. Yeah, we played oh gosh, I don't know, some kind of cafeteria show or something very early on at
Oh
UMass. It
yeah,
was
the
almost like
Blue
a
Wall.
rec center or something. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
something
What band were you in?
sort of really fun. I'm in a band right now called No Age,
Oh
and we were
yeah.
in a band before called Wives, and
Okay.
I think we
Yeah.
had come there in the early 2000s. I think it was a Wives show, and it was very very small. It's kind of underground sort of thing, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. But great. So then from UMass to the south to Raleigh.
Yeah.
What was that transition like, and what brought you there, and sort of where was that journey?
Really also just kind of incidental and convoluted. I mentioned the Connells, and that was,
Hmm.
them, and like, what Mitch Easter was doing, and REM, and, all that like Southern romantic thing was, I don't know, it was just kind of calling me. And a friend of mine and I took a road trip during like spring break, and we just drove down here. And, I knew a couple of people here, and I don't know what it was about Raleigh that I just really, well, now I know what it was, but then I didn't know what it was. It was just really, it felt safe and I liked it. I don't know, I felt very at home here. And I didn't think, I mean, it was like, do I graduate? I didn't want to go into clinical psychology, and I didn't feel like I had any options in that academic route that were like really, um, felt, I didn't resonate with it, and I didn't want to be
Hmm.
a clinical psychologist. And um, I didn't want to work at a major label record company. I wasn't really cool enough to be in, like work at Matador. I didn't want to stay in Boston. I really just disliked that city. Like, not that I was in Boston, but that, that was like the only option. And
Yeah.
I just figured, I don't know, Raleigh was affordable. It felt like a place that I could kind of figure my shit out. And just wanted to stay here for a couple of years, and there you go. So that, so much for 2 years. But now I realize like the architecture is so similar to like the town that I grew up in India called Chandigarh, and this like small city capital, but not a booming metropolis. Um, Postmodern architecture, the weather, the climate, very similar. And then the farmers market here really drew me in. It was the first time I'd seen, that kind of situation since India. My parents used to go to the farmers market there, like, once a month, and once, like, twice a month, and stock up on veggies. And, here I went to the state farmers market. It's open like 363 and a half days a year. And it wasn't like, now farmers markets are like bougie and like, there's lots of guys with beards selling like cool heirloom radishes. And that's great. I love that stuff too. But this is just like, um, people from Johnson County who just been farming, and they just have tomatoes and, in the summer, and like, okra and eggplant, and, sweet potatoes and mustard greens in the winter. And like, I just thought, wow, you could just really eat here. And there were all these like Asian markets and a lot of Indian people. Not that I was like ever really part of an Indian community, but it was, to me, like the food part of it was kind of a draw. And I don't know, everybody was just really nice. It just felt like a community. And then I later found out that like the town that I'm from in India, Chandigarh, was built in the 50s, and it was designed after the British had left. And the first prime minister, Nehru, had selected an architect who was from Raleigh to design the city. And that kind of blew my mind when I found out, like, living here after, 18, 20 years, I was like, what? That is crazy. But what happened was he kind of laid the plans down, and he was working on the project and flying back and forth from Raleigh to Chandigarh, and his plane crashed and he died. And then the project went to Le Corbusier, the famous French architect who always is credited for designing Chandigarh. And that's who I always thought was like, the architect of my hometown, but it was actually somebody from Raleigh who designed. I know,
Wow.
it's so wild.
That's an incredible
It's so
story. And for
crazy.
you to kind of find yourself, sort of recalibrating yourself on your journey of, through music and through New York City to Amherst, and then sort
Randomly.
of Yeah, yeah, wow. But there's just something that speaks. I think places, like much like we were saying about guitars that can kind of speak to you. I think places are the same way, and that's definitely as a touring musician, one of the benefits you have of living out of that van with that small backpack or suitcase of clothes in a guitar case. You get to see a lot of the world or of the country, and you
Yeah.
kind
And
of places can show themselves to you, and you can resonate.
100%. I mean, every place feels different and you feel differently in them. And sometimes you like yourself in a place and sometimes you don't, it's pretty wild. Like, I believe that. There's
Oh,
an
that's so
inherent
interesting.
energy in places, I think, not to get too hippie, but,
No, no, no. I'm with you. I'll go all the way. So then this is a good chance to also transition into food. Bring up farmers market in Raleigh, and where did your food journey begin? We kind of talked about music and sort of where that began, but now I imagine parallel to that, food is part of the same sort of story,
Yeah, I mean,
or is there, are they separate, or how does that work?
it's in tandem, it's parallel. It is maybe older, maybe not. My first memories are like in India. Like my grandmother used to live with us, and she wasn't that great of a cook, but she cooked every day. My mom was definitely a much better cook than her, but she was always in the kitchen, and so there'd be like we had a big reel-to-reel player, so there'd be music playing, and then the kitchen was there, and I'd go see Bobby, and she was in the kitchen. She was like boiling milk because we would get like raw milk delivered. That's just life, and she would
Hmm.
like always scrape the bottom of the pot with, the cream that would stick and the caramelize. And she let me do things that my mom wouldn't let me do because it was too dangerous. And my mom was right because I burned myself real bad. But those two things were always kind of, I think I'm just like a dreamer, and food was always kind of like, a mode of transportation for me, and so was music, and it was just like I would get in my head and be sort of like feel the feelings that food brought me. But when we moved, we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment. There were 3 kids. We were a family of 3 children, and my parents and my mom was working, and but we ate a homemade meal every night, and I became her de facto sous chef. So, from the age of 9 or 10, I would get home at 3. She would call me and give me instructions on how to start dinner. And so I just kind of learned how to
Wow.
cook, but I wanted to. My sister was pre-med, and she didn't really care about food the way I did. And my brother was the youngest son, so he didn't really have to do very much. He was excused from all activity chores. So I learned, and I just kind of had a knack for it. And then when I left home, even in the dorm, like there was a kitchen in the basement, and I would always like make chicken curry, and it would be like enough for 15 people. I just didn't really know how to do it another way. I've always had like massive dinner parties. Until I opened a restaurant, and then I just had a massive dinner party every night in a different building. Yeah.
That's amazing. But again, paralleling, at least in my experience with touring, especially touring on the cheap, anybody that could cook, or if you can find yourself comfortable in a kitchen, it's a huge benefit to the touring party, to the community, even the people of the
That's
town.
right.
You make food for people in a small town that they've never seen before. We've freaked out many people I remember with one in Dakota. We went to the grocery store, and for about $5 bought enough groceries and lentils to make a curry, and the kids, they freaked out, like, my house smells funny, you can't do that in here. And
Yeah.
we're staying sleeping on someone's floor, and we said, oh, we'll cook you dinner, and
Yeah.
we could do it on the cheap. But they freaked out. They didn't know with all this, what to do with the smell of onion being
I
fried in a
know.
frying
It's like
pan.
my knot's never been the same. I've
Yeah.
had the
Yeah.
very exact same with lentils. Lentils, like
Yes.
you saute ginger, garlic, and onions, and
Uh-huh.
bloom some cumin,
Delicious.
and yeah,
Oh
that
my
we
God.
ate that meal in hotel rooms all across the country, and hotel rooms. It sounds glamorous.
Yeah.
Motel 6s with 8 of us in there, or in some random person's house where the there's like 7 dogs and no toilet
Oh,
paper, you know.
oh yeah.
But our band ate pretty well because I was obsessed with it, and I just couldn't, I
Yeah.
stopped eating fast food when we pretty much went, like right when we started touring. So we would always go to the grocery stores, and we had like a plastic tub under the homemade bench in the van, and it was filled
Hmm.
with, interesting things that would make a Subway salad, become a meal. I said we didn't eat fast food, but we did get, spinach late at night from Subway is a lifesaver sometimes.
Yeah, and it's actually, and it's, you can be relatively healthy for relatively cheap that
Yes,
way as
a
well.
hundred percent.
Especially, yeah, we Dean, my partner in the band, No Age, and I, we're both vegan and very broke for most of our career. So it was a very how do we eat vegan across the country for not much money? You get a handful of things, and you just need some hot water and a
That's
pan.
right. That's right. A hot plate and maybe too much bread,
Yeah.
but yeah, you have to be real
Well, yeah,
creative.
yeah. We at one point we brought a one tour. I forget what year it was, but we brought a rice cooker, and we'd put the rice in there before the show started. We put it behind the drums, and then we
Nice.
played the show. By the time the show was done, the rice would be done, and then we could eat dinner.
Perfectly steamed.
It was
Yeah. Put some
yeah.
nutritional yeast on
Uh,
there and like you're good.
Yeah, it got kind of messy towards the end. I don't think we were able to keep it clean. We kind of had to ditch it for hygiene purposes. I don't
Yeah.
think we weren't the smartest or the most hygienic at that
Well,
point
who
ourselves.
wants to be on rice cleaning duty when you're loading out, like
Yeah,
rice cooker cleaning
yeah,
duty? It's like
yeah.
our cooler would get pretty rank sometimes.
Yeah, it's just the nature of the age and the lifestyle you're kind of living at that point too. It's hard to kind of
That's
keep that stuff
right. Kids
together.
these days don't
Um,
know how good they have it.
Incredible. So food was just part of your life. It was entertainment. It was a service to kind of the community. And then what at what point does it shift focus, and how do you go from guitar and creative music focus to then shifting into a food focus?
It kind of happened simultaneously. Like, after my music management career just kind of imploded because all the bands broke up that I was managing. And I was like, well, now what? I thought I was like a failure. I was 25 years old. And like, my first like my first entrepreneurship had failed. So I got a job in a restaurant and I started playing music, and I was cooking at this like, kind of sandwich place, but it was kind of more than that. We had specials. And so I was doing all the specials there. I was making $9 an hour and working, 14-hour kitchen days. And I loved it, but I also hated it because it was like, all of the things about a restaurant kitchen were like, I'm the only one who cares, that sort of thing. Um, and then when we started touring, I was like, I can't afford to work in the kitchen. Can I please bartend? And so he said, yes. And my boss said, I can't give you a raise in the kitchen, not even 50 cents. So, but you can bartend. If you can hack it as a bartender, you can stay. And so I did. And, we were a busy bar, and I was a good bartender. That style of bartending, high volume, a lot of money. And so I did that and toured, and somehow they let me keep my weekend shifts when I came home from tour. So I just worked in
Wow.
that restaurant. And in the meantime, Paul and two friends opened a music venue downtown called Kings, still called Kings. And I wasn't, I was like, I don't want to have any part of booking a venue. I don't want to run a venue. Like, I want to be in a band. I don't want to work for bands. I was so scarred from that whole part of the management thing. And it was hard enough to just like manage the bands that I was in. So that was happening. And so I helped them with their bar program. And then that building got torn down. We left the Cherry Valance. We started Birds of Avalon. That tour, that thing was kind of taken off. And then that building got torn down for like, the convention center was being built. And there was a whole period for 3 years. We tried to find a space, and I wanted to have like a really small food aspect to it. We wanted to have like a bar that wasn't attached, like wasn't kind of controlled by the music venue, like the bar that would be open all the time. The food part that was like a stationary food truck is what I wanted. Would be open when there were shows, and then they'd be shows. Well, we didn't have any money, so we couldn't find the spot that was like built out that way. We were looking for a second generation place. We didn't really know what we were doing. And so we weren't really, we kept looking at spaces that were shells, and we were like, oh, we'll never be able to afford to build this out. And we were right. So the space that we found that was already built out and was not thriving, not doing well, was a music venue on top and a weird shitty pizza place in the middle and a basement bar. And it was 11,000 square feet.
That's huge.
Huge. But we were so young, naive, hungry, and, had stars in our eyes, and we just said yes, and we just did it. And we came up with, the money to buy the lease, and then we were off. And then I found myself, with a lease on a 3,500 square foot restaurant that once, we did a very slow, a lot of DIY build out, and so I became a chef because I had a restaurant to run. So, dummy.
But it's great, right? I mean, it's the story of being in bands. If you knew all the stuff there was to know, you would never do
That's
it,
right.
or at least, it's part of the way of, like, well, what do we need to get this started? Somebody grab some drums, somebody grab a guitar and a microphone and
buy a van and go.
Yeah. Start playing. And then I imagine the similar sort of DIY aesthetic sounds like it factored into the creation of your first restaurant.
100%. So much. And, there's that fearlessness that you have when you've been on tour that you're like, well, so let's, well, that sucks, today sucked. Yeah. And like, what's it going to be tomorrow? Because you're in a different place and your whole life changes every day. So I don't know. Yeah. There's a dumb, naive, fearless, self like immolating kind of spirit that I think we're okay with. I'm in therapy now. That's okay.
Yeah, you're processing it all, digging it through. But if there is something, just the confidence that is afforded to stupidity. You know what I mean? There's just
well put.
There's just it's the definition of your 20s. It's like I'm too stupid to not be horribly confident in everything I do,
yeah.
And that whether that's music or finance, creative, education, all that stuff. You're just like you don't know what you're doing, yeah. But you're so sure of yourself that you know everything.
That's right. Right.
But I think it's interesting. People I talk to a little bit about food, that food can be a scary thing, whether it's, you're brought up in a thing where your mom or grandma created the best food and it was off limits to you, you could never be as good as them. I think there can be some big role models in that sort of way, or just, you burn a potato or you burn a pot of rice one too many times and you're just like, I'm not doing this. I don't know how to do it. I'm not good at it. It's just like picking up a guitar. I try to play it. I practiced for 30 minutes and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm no good at this. I can't learn an instrument. I can't cook. It must be something people say, but it sounds like, you were able to, that was never an issue for you.
On the contrary, I think for me, like the shame of not being good was something that I would think, probably was just so used to having that feeling from my whole life that was, it was just like my little buddy, my buddy Shane. And it was just a fuel in a way, it's just, just circumstances were such that quitting was just not an option because we would have lost like literally everything, we mortgaged our house and like, that was like we couldn't fail. Wow. And so we just, it became really real. And the first few years of the restaurant were horribly difficult for me emotionally because of all the things that you just said, cooking on command and doing it perfectly every time. I don't think anybody can really do that, but it's just kind of like, it's like playing music. It's like anything. There's just a lot of illusions that, you find yourself needing to like, thinking that you have to fit into But nobody tells you that you can have a dual career. Nobody tells you that,
Hmm.
being a chef isn't just about being a great cook all the time. Being a chef is really so much more. Great cooks don't necessarily make great chefs, and great chefs aren't always the best cooks. There's each of those skills should intersect um, deeply enough for it to be really a good situation. But um, there's so many skills that are involved in that, and confidence, like true confidence and belief in yourself, is like one of them. And you don't learn that until like you're you know I don't know what it takes to learn that. I certainly didn't have the ego to pretend. So I really made a lot of mistakes, and took me a long time to even call myself a chef. And the identity crisis that went along with like what kind of food, because I'm not, it was always hyphenated too, and it didn't really fit into a Yelp category. It didn't fit, I didn't know what to put on Facebook. What kind of restaurant is this? I'm in a small southern city, you know like expressing southern North Carolina produce through the lens of like all of Asia. I'm an
Wow.
idiot. Just
Sounds
open
delicious.
a curry
Yeah.
house, you
Yeah.
dumbass.
Right. It's so funny. I'm not hyper familiar with the world of chef and restaurants. I mean, can you tell me a little bit of, you mentioned the difference between being a good cook and a good chef, and growing into this sort of role, or giving yourself the permission to sort of grow into the role of a chef. Tell me tell me a little bit about what a chef is.
um, a chef is, chief. A chef is somebody
Hmm.
who is like able to manage and successfully run a kitchen and a restaurant and all aspects of it. So, people don't talk enough about sourcing, like being aware of where your products come from, who provides them. I mean, there are easy ways to do everything. You can run a sports bar and you can be a chef at a sports bar and you're running that kitchen, but you're getting everything from one truck, and it's coming in boxes and it's all frozen, or a lot of it is frozen. You're just doing the same thing every week. You're dropping french fries, you're making tater tots, you're doing potato skins, maybe you have a fish special. Cool. But you're it's easier. Like, you're not worried about like, is this paprika different than this paprika? When is the tomato going to be ideal for a raw tomato dish versus a cooked tomato dish? How am I going to manage my costs? Is this person that I just hired on this station, like, are they going to last? And if I want them to last, what do they really want to do? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What do they need to come in to work every day and feel more confident and not feel defeated repeatedly? There's defeat's a part of the growing process, but after a while, people just can't get up anymore. Um,
Mm.
how do you fix the leaky sink? How do you, manage the janitorial costs of your dishwasher? Like, there's so many things, so many aspects to it. It's a puzzle. And to me, a great chef understands food so deeply that it's not really about, your ability to, like, you're not chopping shallots after a certain point. You're teaching somebody to do that, and you're making sure that they know how to sharpen their knives. And that's like the best way I can currently say. You want them to smell that freshly ground coriander, as opposed to the powdered shit that you could buy in the grocery store. And it's like, there's no point. You're just putting dirt in your food. Like, this is why coriander exists, and this is what it brings to the party. Like, they're not going to be with you forever. Your staff isn't going to stay with you forever, but you want them to leave. And even if it's a bad situation, they're going to remember something you taught them. And that's your job as a chef, is to like impart the beauty of food and the wonder that is nature. That's our job as a chef. Cooking,
Wow.
anybody can do that. And not, well,
Well, that's incredible. yeah, most people. But also tell me a little bit about the front facing side of that too, like the role of the chef to the customer and to the sort of the restaurant overall experience. I mean, I think it's incredible. I mean, everything I'm still processing everything you just said about chef to staff. I mean, there's a million little tendrils and lightning bolts going off of where I could, the correlations to band and to all these other kinds of world. But I'm curious also, your relationship to your, I would call them your audience, but I don't your
Yeah,
customers.
yeah,
What is
our
that like?
guests, we call them
Yes,
guests.
there. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Um, well, I mean, that's something I'm still trying to figure out. There's a lot of it. Like when Garland first opened, we had a lot of really bad reviews, and I think about that now because I just opened. Paul and I just opened a restaurant, and the reception is so different. But we got our first really bad review the other day, and I can't help but think about the vitriol that was in those early reviews for Garland. Were the thing that stuck with me the most was like, I don't understand why Indian food shouldn't be this expensive. Why don't they only have one chicken dish on their menu? This is not authentic. It was so much of it was like really, I feel like people were reading my insecurities and just like, rating them on Yelp. And I was like, fuck, man, like, I felt like I was in a race to figure it out, but the audience, the best side of it is like so many people, which, a lot of times I was just kind of trapped in the kitchen. So Paul would have this interaction with our guests way more than I did. And he would just say the things that like, you dream of, like, oh, I didn't know what this was going to be. And when I ate it, it made me remember my grandmother. Like, that the uniting factor of food, people just being their most vulnerable, like they're least guarded in the best situation when they're sitting at a table with somebody they like or love and they order something, they're like hopefully having the best moment of their day. Their guard is down and you give them something that makes them feel something nice or makes them nostalgic or makes them happy, gives them pleasure. Yeah, it's superficial, whatever, but I think that connection is really like the core of the joy of life, and if you can bring that to somebody, it's pretty damn cool. It's like being on stage and making somebody happy. Like making somebody happy with something you do is that's life. That's like the thing.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's so visceral and it's so personal.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that the relationship that people have with food and to love a restaurant and to come back to a restaurant and to kind of have that excitement about a restaurant, and you tell your friends,
That's right.
Which is always the best
It's
thing,
the
best thing you could ever hope for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no amount of advertising or marketing you can do than just word of mouth.
Yeah, we never did.
This is great.
We never spent any money on that. It's just like, if you get that feeling and you're trying to chase that feeling again, that's pretty awesome, and if you can deliver that same thing again, like, this is how I remembered it, and it's exactly how I remembered it. That consistency is really hard. That's also chef.
Right. I imagine there's a certain amount of, growth that you expect from yourself or change that you want to, change the menu constantly and kind of explore and be creative. But I imagine there's some people that just come in and order the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people that when I like the dish I'm going to keep coming back to that place for that one dish.
Yeah.
What is, I mean, this is a little inside baseball, I guess, or sort of a singular idea, but what is your relationship to that sort of the diversity versus just the basics?
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
I mean, it's a puzzle too, for a long time I was really scared to change things on the menu. I didn't have time, first of all, to work on stuff. And the things that were on the menu were like, everybody knew how to do them in the kitchen and people liked them. And, there was a lot of fear for like the first 2-3 years. And then, you just kind of start realizing these are the repeats and these are the things that you just kind of get a sense that like people are just getting this because they don't have an option, right? Like it's kind of a lazy order as opposed to this like, oh, I go there, you got to get this one thing, I've never been a signature dish kind of person. Like people always say, what's your signature recipe? It's like, you don't want to do that at home. Like you can't, you don't have the stuff. Like it'll take you 4 days and you're not going to, it's like, just come to the restaurant and eat it. Restaurant food is different than home food. But The pandemic kind of like gave me a lot of permission to be fearless and like, I had just like I'm not a sentimental person anyway. And I was just like, well, that's just coming off the menu. Like it gave me permission
Wow.
to, because it was all going to be over anyway. And I didn't think that we were going to survive. So it was just like, just do the things that like you want to do and don't do the things that you don't want to do because fuck it. Like, what does it mean anyway? Let's just,
Yep.
it's a day to day situation at this point. So don't waste your
Yeah.
time.
Make that experimental record. Who gives a shit?
That's
It's
right.
your personal weird record you want to make. Put it out because who cares?
Exactly that.
You're not gonna have a pop hook. You're never gonna go back on the road.
Yep.
Live music's over.
It's,
Make the personal record.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, I lost my mom too. And that like whole
Oh,
thing
I'm
like
sorry.
really makes you think about mortality and like, time and the fleeting nature of it. And, they're really like, don't get in your head. Don't be paralyzed by the things that you think people expect of you. It's just, no, life is too
Yeah.
short.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing, when you're talking about reviews, of getting reviews for the restaurant is, and obviously music is heavily reviewed. I'm sure you experienced that as well, and especially in that era,
Hmm.
when you were playing. What's worse? A bad restaurant review or a bad record review?
They all hurt. It all hurts
It's
the
all bad.
same. Yeah,
All
it's the
bad.
same
Okay.
wound.
Yeah. But is it the same triumph as well? A good record review, a good restaurant review?
um, I guess so. A record
Yeah.
review happens from like somebody who's like professional, like they're writing.
Hmm.
Restaurant reviews tend to be, some Joe Schmo, but it's really like, good or bad. Like the bad ones you really remember. The good ones, you remember the ones that really get it. Like they say a few things that you're like, that was my intention. And they like recognize my intention. And that's like the thing. And also like, just like in a band, a restaurant is more, I'm not a singer songwriter. Like this is a collaborative effort so much. And no matter what, you still feel responsible for, how good of a collaboration it is. It's your job as, a key member in a band, I guess, to like make sure that
Hmm.
things are happening right and your own headspace affects that. And, you're in a restaurant, you might be training somebody and they mess up and they really, it alters somebody's experience. What are you going to do? It's just a moment in time. But
Yeah.
at the
Yeah. It's
moment
just that day.
when you get it back, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, let me think how to transition into this one. So, do you know Brooks Headley? Did
I
he ever come?
do.
He's come up in this sort of similar time and frame. I've gotten to know him as a drummer, and then when he became pastry chef, and we were able to eat at his restaurant a handful of times. And he had this habit of bringing courses out and describe. And I think he knew because he knew his audience, he knew who we were and what we shared a music language. He would bring courses out and he would say, "This is like the faith void split. On this side you have this, and on this side you have this, and this is exciting." And he would give us, and I don't think he thought that while he was making it or had any intention. I think it was something he must have come up with between the kitchen and our table just to mess with us and give us a thrill and also something different for his day. I think he had a very straight job for a lot of years, and so the chance to stoke out his friends, gave him a little bit of a breath of relief. But do you ever find yourself in relationship to dishes, equating songs or styles or feelings? Because a lot of time, it is a nostalgia or it is a feeling. Like, do you have an experience in any kind of relationship like that? Like a song inspired a dish or a dish sort of relates to a particular feeling that a song could also relate to?
Um, yes, in a lot of ways. I mean, Brooks is like a really brilliant person, so I'm not going to even like touch that. He is one of a kind, and I don't know him well. We actually only got to know each other through Instagram, like once I
Oh,
started cooking. So we didn't know each other in the music world.
incredible.
Um, but I think of, so I've always referred now to Garland as a prog project. We were a prog band. We did so many parts, everything in every song, everything in every dish, like everything had like layers and layers and layers, and and I want this new restaurant to be a disco remix of like three riffs, and that's it. Like I just want it to be simple, but I really think of dishes and um, when we're coming up with dishes in terms of frequencies, like I often say it needs more bass or it needs more treble. And I think
Wow.
that really translates, like, umami, I think of as bass and like acid. And then there's layers, like, do you want to hear of the cymbal, or do you want to hear like the pick hitting the guitar string? Like there's different things that are satisfying that a dish wants, but you always start with like, you're in service to the song, like you're in service to an ingredient or you're in service to an idea. I think of things more in that um, sort of template or structure. I think more than particular bands. I mean, gosh, like it would be cool to do a whole David Bowie series on a menu. That's an
Ooh.
inspired idea right now. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I really like prog versus disco is the thing that's kind of in theme for the last couple of months. And I'm,
Oh.
I'm really dedicated to that. Like, I just want to have fun. I want people to have fun. I want it to be casual ish. Well done, like people
Mhm.
slight disco as like being simple, and it's not easy to play that kind of music. You have to have a lot of
Mhm.
restraint and you have to have a lot of chops, and make it look easy, but ultimately people are there to party, and it's got a good
Mhm.
beat and you can dance to it.
Yeah, like ESG or
Yeah,
something along those lines. That's what I'm
exactly.
thinking of. Yeah,
Right.
and which leads me to the next idea. Do you play music, or I mean, is there background music in the restaurants?
Always, yeah.
And do you choose that? And what's that experience like as a musician and as a chef?
It's
What do you
super
do?
important. I don't normally have time to like do the playlist. Paul does, and he's really good at it. But like in the new place, we've had some curveballs, and I'll say two things about this. At Garland, every single time, I'd say 95% of the time in the 9 years that we were open, when I'd walk out of the kitchen, there would be no music playing, and it would be in between songs. And I cannot tell you how many times that happened. And I would immediately be like, what the fuck? There's no, oh,
Oh.
okay. Like it's just between songs. Just calm down. Lately, like now um, we've always been really careful about what we play. Like, we go to a restaurant and, it's like some weird Pandora jukebox with commercials, and it's just like I want to die for them. Like, what are you
Yeah,
doing? They're
yeah.
it's such a big part of the vibe, and
It's like,
yeah.
how do you say I don't care any louder than that? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't care.
exactly.
Just put on. It's like
It doesn't
a
matter.
dentist office.
Right.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it doesn't
exactly.
matter what kind
Yeah.
of salt you use. Yes, it does.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's a good way of thinking about I guess, yeah, those little things you can pick up on. Does a restaurant give a shit? Or,
Yeah,
how
exactly.
dedicated are they? If they have good music playing.
That's right.
Oh man. Wow. Well, I have a million more questions, and I feel like we could talk all day, but I don't want to take up all of your time. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it's been a pleasure to meet you
God,
and
it's been
and
such a
and
great
talk and share a
conversation. I
story.
agree.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we could let's do part two.
Yes.
Double
Yeah. It's
album.
fantastic. Yeah. And then are you still playing guitar? Are you still
Yeah.
what is the activity of the band's situation, the music situation? Obviously, restaurant takes up 140% of your day,
Well,
but is
we
there ever time to
we
play?
closed Garland in August, at the end of August, and opened Aja 3 weeks ago. And so we did have like a few months where we were playing pretty regularly, but then we moved houses and our guitar stuff hasn't moved over here. So I'm like dying inside a little bit that I haven't touched a guitar in 4 weeks. But I just need to go get my stuff. And
Set it up.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have the chops I used to, but it's okay. I don't care. Like, it still feels good to play, and sometimes things sound good, and that makes me happy.
That's it. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Cheetie, thank you so much
Thank you,
for being a
Randy.
guest
It's
here.
been
I,
it's
I
been
appreciate it.
lovely.
Hopefully, we'll
I
talk
hope so
soon.
too. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Wow, there she is, Cheetie Kumar. I am so blown away and so impressed and really just inspired. I want to go out and buy some fresh cumin and produce at a farmer's market and make something. I definitely love to cook, but I've never really thought about it as in depth or sort of with any kind of real purpose. Like she was explaining her process of running that kitchen. I mean, just an incredible story. And think really indicative of everybody's, hyphenate journey. You kind of start off, just trying to survive, and then finding yourself at different crossroads in your life, and, deciding to switch it up or combine more than one thing, or just try to make it all make sense, and you find yourself in a totally different world. But part of that is, I think, a lot of us have been used to just living in different worlds and sort of wearing many hats, all the time. Is something very familiar about that. I don't think people in a hyphenate, career space or lifestyle really, are that uncomfortable with it. It sort of just seems to always make sense. So it's interesting to kind of hear that from her, and, from her background, sort of where she learned those sort of skills of having to be a chameleon and sort of fit in. And just, really insightful. I was just blown away and super impressed and inspired. So if you are in Raleigh, North Carolina, please go to Ajja. It's AJJA, her new restaurant. She's just opened up. And also do yourself a favor and go listen to some Birds of Avalon. Really cool band. And go way back to Cherry Valance too, and check that out too if you're feeling a little bit more energetic, a little punkier. And really, really inspired. We'll talk to you guys soon.